It would not get out of the way. Yeah.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Again, welcome to everyone for being here today. I know how busy your schedules are, but as far as the school funding committee on the school board side, I'd like to, we have a little quick order of business to take care of, is to review the minutes from our meeting, our committee meeting on March the 21st, and you've had a chance to review those. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes?
I would just like to recommend that the public go and review the meeting as in addition to the minutes. The minutes are abbreviated from a 3.5-hour meeting, so go to the public meeting that we had there and get it firsthand.
Very good. Again, we're following the same format that I think, have done in the past with all meetings, but I certainly concur with you, Mr. Williams. It was a very long, lengthy meeting, but a good one. Hearing none, no corrections, I hear a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? I think we just had it. Thank you, Newt. Motion passes, and the minutes are approved as submitted. I'd like to go back to, would the commissioners have any, as far as opening or anything that you need to do and want to make sure that everybody?
No.
Okay, all right, very good. Moving to the second item, again, thank you everyone for being here. Everybody's schedule, and I think it's you're pretty much wide open with everything that's going on. It's a very, at this particular time of the year with the budget season. I want to thank the commissioners and the staff and everyone for gathering not only today, but the steps that we're taking to get both boards together to begin discussion about something that's very dear to all of us, and that's education, along with every other department and governmental entity that we're involved with. Very important, and appreciate your time being here today. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Collins. You know by now, a new superintendent. There's no stranger to Onslow County, but let him begin this meeting and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. First of all, thank you for being here. I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to come together. Just a couple of housekeeping items, and we're trying to make this as informal as possible. And you can see we've got, we're videotaping, got all the mics and nameplates, but we really want it to be more of a discussion than anything else. But we do have drinks, water, soda, coffee, and the bathrooms are right out the door to the left. And so anytime that you need any of that, just feel free to get up and take care of that. The way that that we looked at it, when I say we, the school board and school board staff, when we met, we looked at how this could be broken out and really looking at two separate pieces, because we're at a time now where we're running short on time to get ready for the 1920 school year. So our thinking was to have a recommendation from this committee on what do we do next year? What do we do for the 1920 year, which may look different than what we could come up with as a group moving forward in terms of the funding formula for 2021 and on out. So really looking at it from that perspective, kind of two pieces. And that was just our thinking on that. And I kind of felt like that may be where you guys were headed, but that was the perspective that we took. Also, in looking at that, there's three parts to it. The funding is the current expense, and then the capital, and then the long-range construction piece. So you've got three pieces to the funding, and then looking at it from those two lenses. So in doing all that, we wanted to start off, and the way we started our meeting, that when we met as a group, with a little bit of history. And we're not going to go all into all the detail that we went into with our group, but Mr. Hallman here in just a few minutes is going to kick that part off with where have we been, and looking at the funding formula, how that came about, and then also looking at our current numbers, our growth and opportunities that we have, and the needs that we have, and obviously, just as the county, I was at your meeting when you were talking about budget, you have some of the same kinds of concerns. We have needs that far exceed what we're going to be able to ask for in terms of funding. So we want to be very reasonable about this. So in working together, I know that we'll be able to come up with something, but I guess to end my little speech here, to get back to what is our purpose, at the end, we're going to have or need to have something to recommend this year. And then moving forward, we can continue to have these kinds of meetings throughout the year to come to a formula for how we move forward in 2021. So can everybody, does that sound right to you guys as to what we're here for, the purpose of it?
Yeah, I think I would say that structure is correct. Whether or not we can nail down to actually saying what we can do this year today, I don't think we can go that far. Obviously,
Right.
we're both bodies are in the middle of budgeting season,
Right.
and so we're having to hammer out a lot of things. But I think, looking at what your needs are, short term as well as long term, and how we can try to come to an accommodation of that in a way that is predictable for both sides, I think
Okay.
is the goal.
All right. Very good. Sounds like we're on the same page then. All right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Holloman, and I know Mr. Myers may jump in here on some of the capital stuff in just a little bit, but as we're going through this, if you want to say, whoa, wait a minute, and let's get a little more clarification, please feel free to do that, okay? Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Dr. Collins. I was asked to share a little bit of the history on our funding arrangements with the county and kind of how that has progressed over the years. So, and some of the data you're going to see here goes back to around 2002, and going back in that time frame, we're looking at, in particular, local current expense funding, our operational funds from the county. Every year, the situation was the school system would develop their budget request, based on the needs of the school system, and then take that to the county commissioners, asking for approval, never really knowing how that was going to shape out in the end. There wasn't much predictability, necessarily on our side as to what the county would furnish in funding, and I guess from the county standpoint, there wasn't much predictability in what the request would be from the school system, and it was a 1 year at a time type situation. We'd outline, or we'd go through and collect what our needs are, knowing that we would not get anywhere close to what was needed. We would whittle that down to the most basic needs we wanted to focus on trying to improve for that year, and having our continuation costs, because just like with the county, where you see things where you have to deal with kind of required increases for retirement rates or hospitalization cost rates. You set your own salary schedules, but we have to follow the state's mandated rates there. There are things like that that are just built in. If you're just going to continue operations, they're going to increase your costs. And other things that go up, whether it's property insurance or workers' compensation or whatever you have to deal with just to continue operation. So that's kind of how the budgets would start. Get that. If there's anything that you're trying to focus on improvement for students, build that budget, take it in, and see what would be granted from the county commissioners. Well, every time we'd go in after whittling this down, we would not get the full request, oftentimes far from it, and then we'd have to come back and cut the budget down to fit whatever had been determined by the commissioners as the total allotment. And what that resulted in was year in and year out, the amount of funding that was being provided for students in Onslow County when compared to what the average funding of counties providing to students across the state was such a great divide there between the level of funding. And so if you look at this document in your packet, if you go to the very bottom row and just kind of walk you through this history of appropriation. So in fiscal year 2002-2003, the local appropriation by Onslow County was at $903 per student, whereas the state average was $1,344. So if you see in that next column, the per pupil gap, that was a $441 per student difference between what was received for Onslow County students from Onslow County government in comparison to what, for all students across the state provided through county governments. If you take that figure, $441, and multiply it by our average daily membership that year, the 21,254, that left an overall funding gap of almost $9.4 million below average that year. So in other words, we had to operate $9.4 million below what average funding would be to provide educational opportunities for our students. And you can see that in that year, across the counties, we ranked 79th of all school districts in the state that year. So taking this history and moving it forward, if you go up the next to last column, the Onslow County Schools funding gap, you can see as you're going up there figures in the $9, $10, even $11 million range. It was pretty common for us to be in that range during that period of time, and we knew that we needed to be able to do better for our students in providing more equal opportunities because they're competing against students from across the state for class seats in universities or for jobs throughout, and we want to make sure that we provide the very best education that we can for them. So during this, we started looking at some different approaches of funding rather than a year-by-year type approach. We first went to a method where the county provided like a 3-year what the appropriation would be for the next 3 years. We were getting at the time probably about $1 million increase a year, and still staying towards the bottom of the pack in the state rankings. And so the commissioners decided to step up and give us a 3.5, 3.1, and $3.1 million increases over the next 3 years, which helped improve us in the state a bit. And it also started turning the focus towards more predictability and a little longer range planning there. But still, it didn't provide an ongoing way of tracking funding. So the next phase, we kind of moved into the first formula type approach. And granted, that formula had a lot of data points, a lot of variables. It was tied in some ways to the low wealth formula with the state, because at the time we also had concerns about being able to leverage all the funding that we could get from the state in low wealth funding, because the county has to meet certain funding requirements in order to get 100% of the low wealth funding that's available to them from the state. And if you don't, they actually cut back the state funding that you get. So it's kind of a double whammy. You're underfunded locally, and because of that, the state also withholds funding that you could have achieved. So we went through that approach, that formula for a few years, and then the county was interested in revamping the formula and making it more simple, straightforward, easy for everyone to look at kind of at a glance and be able to determine what the funding would be, and make sure we build in that predictability. And that's when we went to the more recent funding formula. Before I get into that, again, going up this funding column, you can see as you start moving closer to the recent years, that funding gap decreased. But we're still staying in that $3 million, $4 million gap below state average, and that's because of the way the recent funding formula was established, and I'll talk about that a little more. But you can see, even with these formulas, our ranking in the state, still never really rose above, the high 30s range. Our gap was usually still in the $3 million range, even with the funding formula in place. So with the funding formulas, it's not making us, being top in the state or even at state average. We still trail that. So if you turn to the next,
Just excuse me for
Yes, sir.
Didn't other counties begin to pour money into their? That was a contributing factor. Well, other counties were beginning to increase their contributions to per pupil expenditure there, and so that kind of caused this thing.
and that happens every year because just like
but there was a
about
heavy emphasis in these years here, and
it's kind of a constant trend, and it's because of some of the factors we talked about earlier. We talked about where you had to meet state mandated salary increases and hospitalization, retirement, all these costs that are going up. Other places, also recognize that you can't, do this year what you did last year with the same amount of money. It's going to cost more to do it, and so counties recognize that and provide additional funding each year to match those needs. So yes, you will see a natural progression of the per pupil appropriations going up. If for no other reason, just to match rising costs.
Can I add that though, Jeff?
Sure.
What you're saying, you're right, you're absolutely right. The state average, when we instituted implemented the funding formula for 14-15 up until, it took up to fiscal year 19-20, it grew 14.9% over that time frame, the state average.
Over how many years?
14, up to fiscal year 14-15 through fiscal year 18-19. It's grown 14.9% the state average. So
Okay.
just throwing it out there to answer your question, it has grown significantly. While our population,
So that's about 4%.
14.9%, yeah.
So that's less than 4% a year.
But our student population grew over that same time frame, projected around 5.5%.
Right.
Just to
So
give
you have
context.
So, and that's a good point. Is that when you look at the dollars here, you're looking really at two things. One, that per pupil appropriation amount is going up, just to cover cost increases, and I guess that was like less than 4% a year. But we see retirement rate increases and hospitalization rate increases and everything greater than that in there. But at the same time, you look at the student population growth that we experience here in Onslow County, and so to meet that as well, you do see.
And it is, I'm sorry.
Well, and to Commissioner Price's point, you've got in the chart that you presented here, 7 fiscal years, I guess, of the state average pure pupil funding being in the $1,700 range, and then obviously the 3 years since then going up to in the $1,819 and now over $2,000. So it does seem to be in the last 3 years there was sort of a shift there.
Well, I think part of the things that impact this is, during the economic downturns, you saw where, everybody's hitting the brakes on things, and there were a lot of places across the state where they're having to RIF people and, lay off teachers and TAs and that sort of thing. And then, when the economy, picks back up, they try to start to recover some of that. So, there's another factor that's in there.
The one column that's missing that I'd like to see is the student achievement. How did it fluctuate? What was our ranking as far as our school-wide ranking there? Did it fluctuate as well with the amount of per pupil expenditure? And because I know Jones County's like what $300-400 less than us, and their achievement rates are actually higher, school-wide, system-wide rather. And so that's the interesting thing I'd like to see is our ranking in student achievement moving up as we're, because it doesn't seem to be a direct correlation between the amount of per pupil expenditure and achievement.
And when you look at the funding that you have there per pupil, the local's not the whole story, because there's also state funding, federal funding, and various places get additional funding there as well. So I'm not sure what is in Jones County, but I know they get like small county funding.
We've got more students at one grade level than they have K-12.
So and there's a lot of factors, and then as you know from years of teaching that a lot of times achievement is heavily dependent on what level did the student come in the door at, and then how far can you take them during that year. So there's a lot of factors.
Yeah, I'm sure back in 2002 and early 2000s, Southwest would have been a school of achievement or a school of excellence a couple of times during that time, and despite the fact our per pupil expenditure might have been a whole lot lower. And so I just don't see the correlation between the two. And I'd like to see how it comes out as far as the rankings.
Well, I can't necessarily tie particular achievement to a particular dollar level, and that's certainly something we can look at and see, but there's so many factors in there, I'm not sure that you're going to be able to tie it directly. But I think just kind of generally speaking, everyone would understand if you have to cut back on resources that may be available to a student, they don't have as many teacher assistants to work with, or there's larger teaching loads because you have less teachers, or a whole number of factors, what kinds of resources they have, it limits teaching opportunities.
I kind of agree with what Mark says. I would like to see student achievement, but I also understand that Jones County is a low-wealth county, and they get more money from the state to make up for part of that. They also don't have the turnover that we have associated with the military in the community here, so it's more of a rural farming community, more established. Kids go into the system and probably start at K and go all the way through 12, whereas here, we have about a quarter of our students turnover every year. So we're constantly have to replenish the pile, but the statistics that we have on the graduation rates or the achievement rates are not necessarily indicative of some of these other counties that are out there and that are more rural, or even the city counties, the more industrialized cities like Raleigh and Charlotte, where the kids may go into the system and come out of the system and not have the turnover like we do here in Fayetteville, et cetera. So.
We have people entering and exiting multiple times within a career area. Good point. Yes, sir.
Can you help me reconcile the local PPA versus the state average for 14-15 through 17-18? Because I just wanted to make sure I was correct. I looked at the funding formula, and it requires the county to use the ADM. So by definition, we would be using the average.
Okay?
So reconcile, is it
Sure.
a different time of year?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this
How's
is,
that fair?
well, this is fair because this is statewide information. So what this is to provide you a picture of how we stack up against the state. And this is how the state does the calculation. When they do that, they're using final ADM, which is throughout the entire year, and so that is what this is based on, and that's done for every district in the state. And so since we have that data point for comparison, they're all being compared in the same manner. When you get to our funding formula we've had, we've got some other data points that were chosen for that funding formula, and I can go through that.
Yeah, it should be pointed out too that even though it's 1,855 at the end of that's June 30th, 2018, when we did the funding formula this in fiscal year 18-19, at the data that we knew at that time, it came out to 1,928.
Again, we're talking about two different
Oh yeah,
periods
yeah,
of
but
calculations for two different things. So keep in mind, this is historical data that was collected by the state after the fiscal year is already completed and everybody's turned in their audited reports so they can compare to each other. So they're taking a ADM for an entire school year and comparing that with the appropriations they got from the county. That way you have an apples to apples comparison here. So this is to give you a comparison of how everything's shook out after everything's completed. When we were doing our funding formula, when we're at this time of the year, no one knows what the after fact calculation, the way this is going to be done by DPI, will be for per pupil appropriation this year, because we don't know what the final average daily membership will be. And we don't even know necessarily, looking at the other districts around the state, what the final appropriation from the county would be, because their county may come in during the year and add additional appropriation, or perhaps even take some away. So you're looking at two different time frames and two different purposes.
I think to capture the history of it, though, it would be good to put a column showing what it was as of October of, X amount. You know what I'm saying? Like you look at that, you say it's only 1,855. Yes, that's what it ended up as of 6/30/2018. But at the time we did the calculation, it was 1,928 per student based on data that we had at that time. Personally, I think as a finance perspective, I think it'd be good to put another column so you could reflect that.
Yeah. Well, see, we don't have that data from the state. So what we're trying to do is use data that's readily available from the state, so that this is not something that Jeff dreamed up and pulled some numbers from somewhere. This is something that we can point to, that DPI has done a calculation that gives a fair apples to apples.
I understand that, but I think to really truly capture the spirit of the funding formula, that would be useful data to look at, just from my perspective. Or from
Okay.
my professional
Local
opinion.
budgeted versus local actual.
Exactly. Yes, I think that would be a fairer way of looking at it, personally.
What I'm hoping to do by going through this history is just to say, when you do a statewide comparison using the same data points for all the districts across the state, and it doesn't matter so much what time of year you choose. If you chose a different time of year for us, well, then you have to choose that same time of year for them. You're going to come out with the same type of data. What you're going to see is this gap has been consistent, but has gotten narrower over time because of the efforts of the county commissioners through recent years to close that. And so when you go to this kind of depicts that. You can see that while we never reach the state average or cross over the state average, you can see that gap narrowing over time, and that's because of those efforts that have been undertaken over the last several years to try to close that. And we know that given the old formula, we're not going to reach state average, but at least it keeps you from falling farther behind and getting a larger gap. If you turn to the next chart, this just shows it broken down on a per pupil basis, and you can see at the beginning of this time frame there's a large gap on a per pupil basis, and that narrowed over time. And then the next one is the exact same thing, but just doing it basically in terms of total dollars across the district. And then finally, this is the ranking of how we compare with other districts across the state. And you can see that at the beginning of this time frame, starting at 79th in the state, that we have risen. But still, even with these funding formulas in place, we're not, reaching the top in the state. In fact, we're kind of peaking out around those high 30s, around 40 or so, and now I've actually dropped back in mid 40s. So that's kind of showing that the funding formula didn't take us off the charts or anything. It made some improvements, but we're not worried about becoming the top funded school district in the state based on this.
Could we go back to Mr. McCall's question with regards to that? I'm a little confused over. I understand we're using state appropriation numbers of what we got, and they're based on what the state does, and that's after fiscal year is closed out, and they've had a time to calculate all of the district counties, the different counties, and all of the different funding formulas, and that's how we came up with our numbers. But Mr. McCall referenced a number for 17-18 that was 1928.
Yes, which would have been the state average as of 6/30/2017, because that's what's known at the time we're in the budget process. So we would take that number as of 6/30/2017, take that number times the 80 as of October of fiscal year 17-18, and that's how you would arrive at what we're going to fund the schools at, based on the formula that we put in place. So that's all I'm alluding to or pointing to, is that what we knew at the time that is what we're funding the students at.
And that's where you got in your packet the funding formula, and this was when we went to this one, it went more from just the local current expense, but it also went into the annual capital outlay and the construction program to actually develop a comprehensive approach to funding to provide that predictability for the county and for the school system in going forward with that. And this is actually something that the county commissioners received an award at the School Board Association for this, and I know it's been touted around the state as a model for having a comprehensive approach for planning. And in there, it lays out what you're talking about for the formula. If you go to page 2, and under Roman numeral 1, it says as to annual current expense budget. That's where Onslow County will annually budget an amount equal to the most recent known second month average daily membership, because we're at this point in the year planning for the upcoming budget year. We don't know for certain how many students we're going to have next year. The county was not wanting to project. They wanted to have a historical number you can go to and point at, and this has been verified by DPI as a historical number. So we used the most recent second month ADM, so it'd be going back to the beginnings of this year to fund next year. And that's where I was talking about earlier about you don't have to worry about this formula us catching us up to state average, because the year that we're funding for that number of students, the student number we're using is the year behind the funding year. And then if you go on, it says that ADM times the most recent known statewide average for per pupil appropriation by counties within the state. So we just talked about how when you look at this that's published by DPI, those per pupil appropriation numbers, right now they don't know what that average is for this year, because this year's not over yet. Counties haven't finished making all their appropriations for the year. We don't have the final student counts for the year, but so you're waiting, and it'll be probably on into usually November or December by the time they have that data and can publish that. So we're planning for next year. We don't know what next year's average amongst all those counties will be. We don't know what this year's average is going to be yet either. We're going back to last year's to plan for next year. So that number is 2 years behind the funding year.
So we're using 2 data points to make the calculations, and both the data points are a year behind at least.
But the student number is 1 year behind, and the per pupil preparation is 2 years behind. And we agreed to that, knowing it doesn't put us at average, but at least we continue to move along as the state moves along, and we're not in a situation where we're falling farther and farther behind. Those growing gaps of $8, $9, $10 million gap in funding, we're probably $3 million or so behind the state, but at least we're not so far behind.
If we had a chart or another section within the chart that you had here, and we plugged in those numbers from 14-15 through 27-18 to 17-18, if we plugged those in 2 separate columns with those particular numbers, how we come up with the funding formula, how do those compare with the numbers that you have in your chart? Do you understand what I'm saying? Otherwise, we know what those numbers are because for the last 4 or 5 years, we've used those numbers to come up with our per pupil appropriations per the local expense, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow. If you run it by me one more time.
If you added 2 other columns to this chart,
Okay.
one of them that for 14-15, the per pupil amount that we use and our second month ADM, and you put those in there, how would those numbers compare to what we have here with regards to funding gap?
Well, you can't compare that because then you're comparing different data points to the state. We want to be fair and compare apples to apples. So if you're looking for a gap, that is the gap because that's the average. If you're looking for the number that we're using in our formula, if you go to that local per pupil appropriation state average, that number that you see for a year will be the number that is in the formula 2 years later.
Would the funding formula numbers be more or less than what we have in your chart is what I'm trying to get at. Otherwise, from our standpoint, it's advantageous for us to go back and compare it to what the state average is. And we have to compare those using state average numbers, okay? But when the county funds us, the county doesn't fund us based on the state average for this particular chart. We have another funding formula that we utilize, and it would be helpful to me to know whether or not when they're funding that, are we above or below where we're at.
If you go on here and look at 16-17 and the local per pupil state average $1,928, that's the number that was used here in 19 because that's 2 years back. So if when we did our to set up the appropriation for this year,
sure,
we used 1928.
Okay.
For next year, if we were following this same formula, we would use that 2002 because that is 2 years behind the funding year.
All right.
I guess it's a matter of can you capture the data for the rest of the schools or rest of the districts in the state as of that October date. You know what I'm saying? Like we're looking at it. We're doing a snapshot as of October. But can you is it possible to gather that data? Probably not. It might be very.
Well, here's the thing: is you're gathering that data. You're just gathering it a little later. So if for the year that we're in, 19, okay, they will publish what the what the state average is and what our average is for this year. So in November or whatever, when they put that out, you'll have a apples to apples comparison of how everything shook out.
I realize that. I think the only way you could do with Mr. Williams is proposing is you have to look at the other districts as of the ADM total as of October of any given year by whatever the state average was. And we're probably getting a little bit into the weeds, but anyway. I understand the question he's asking. The data is not readily available as it is at the end of
Right.
each school year.
But if you're comparing all districts the same way,
No, I understand.
you're gonna have the same trend, you know, so you're gonna wind up with the same type of gapping issue.
But, you know, I just think it's a good point to just reflect the fact that in the spirit of the funding formula, that's where we were at that given time, just from a different perspective. That's it.
Okay. So, moving on with the funding formula that's been in place, just went through the local current expense calculation, how that was done. Again, we talked about how this was a comprehensive approach that added in also the annual capital outlay and the construction piece. And I will go to those in just a moment, but I will draw to your attention, you have a one-pager in here. This does show the calculations for the current year that we're in. You can see the bottom set of numbers here. That's where we use that 1928 times the ADM, as we had talked about in here, using our second month ADM. And of course, we also have to include in there the charter schools, because we're required to be the collectors for the charter schools and then send the money out to the charter schools. That's the way the state has it. And we also reduce it for any tuition paying students that come in from out of county. So that's how we came up to the 51.6 million for the year that we're in now. If we were to continue using that same formula that we've been using, at the top you can see the ADM numbers that we have there for next year's calculation. That's using this year's numbers. And then that 2002 per pupil appropriation going back to here, which was from fiscal year 18 being used, not in 19, but in 20.
Hasn't that ADM number come down from 26,960 to 26,639?
Well, the 26,960, what that reflects, and again, this is based on the funding formula that we've had in place, which was the second month ADM, and then to that we also have to add in the charter school students, because we're required to pass along appropriation to them as well, and then we have reduced it by the tuition paying students. So if you look at this year, this is not in your packet, but just running through those numbers. Second month ADM this year was 26,639, and then we had 324 charter school students that we're paying for, and then there were 3 students from out of county that come in and pay tuition, so we reduce it by that. And so if you add the 26,639, the 324 minus the 3, that gets you to the 26,960. And so that's the ADM figure, and we talked about where we got the 2000. So that will be the calculations there, and that would yield about a $2.3 million increase following the formula.
So you're using allotted 27,919 as the allotted ADM.
I think you're on a different page.
If I'm looking okay.
The one I'm talking about up top, it says JEFP, fiscal year joint education funding policy. So I'm going by this is the way we've been doing it type thing. I'll get to the if we followed a state-like approach, what that looks like. Okay. So next, I think you have in your packet the House Bill 1031, and that shows the new legislation that came out that gave a default mechanism if there was final agreement on local funding, and in there it basically lays out how to calculate that. Now, granted, there are data points in here that are not yet available. because they use things like the second quarter employment cost index. Well, the 2018 second quarter we haven't completed yet, because that's not in until June, and it doesn't get published until July 31. So that number is not available yet.
That would be 2019, not 18.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's
I'm
right.
a year behind here.
Yeah.
I'm so used to working in the past. So, but in the state approach calculation that you'll see, I did use the 18 because I tried to stick as close to what this is calling for as possible, using similar data points. So, since 2019 second quarter is not available and won't be available until July 31, so really is useless in terms of being a planning tool for us, and part of what we all wanted was predictability and planning. So, but just to keep it consistent with that, if we use the number of the year behind, well, that's that same data point, and you'll get to it, the following year. And it also calls for using the allotted ADM. That's a number that DPI issues as to what they allot your ADM to be. That's their projected number for the upcoming year. And so using those factors, you can now pull the one pager that says state formula appropriation approach. Again, as I discussed, we don't have the exact data points from this, but staying true to that same type of approach, trying to have this as a planning tool. If we wanted to adopt something that kind of followed those lines, it starts off with taking this year's appropriation, the $51.6 million, dividing it out by the ADM. I use that same ADM we just talked about a moment ago. This year's students with the charter school and the minus the tuition paid, the $26,960, and so that yielded a PPA of 1915.08. And then the House Bill 1031 talks about plussing that up by the employment cost index. So if you looked at the 2018 second quarter, that was 2.4%. And so if you increase it by that, you get to 1961.04. And then that gets multiplied by the allotted ADM. And so the allotted number from DPI for next year, is 27,598. And then, I don't know what the charter school students will be next year, but it's been growing every year. So I didn't even project. I just used this year's number of charter school students, the 324, added that in. I don't know how many tuition paid students we'll get, but we'll reduce those out. I used the same number that we had this year, which I think has been the same for several years in a row. Those, I think, same three students keep coming. So we're taking the 27,598 plus this year's charter school students, 324, less the 3 tuition paid. That's how we came up with the 27,919, and multiply that by that dollar figure that we just got, the 1961.04, and that yielded 54.7 million. And so using that type of approach that the state has outlined, given the information that we have, that would yield about a $3.1 million increase.
Jeff, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Talking to our couple groups, they're saying how is it determined that you were going to use the allotted ADM? Can you point to a language in the legislation?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
If you'll grab your hearing packet, House Bill 1031, and if you turn to page 2, if you go down near the bottom of the page, under B1, and then it's got item number 3. Now, the amount in subdivision 2 of this subsection rounded to the nearest penny shall then be multiplied by the sum of the following: the allotted average daily membership for the school year. And that's a term that DPI uses. They provide that allotted ADM every year. And so I just went directly by what it said there, the allotted average daily membership. So I went by that allotment. So they put out an allotment sheet, and I can share with you the actual allotment sheet, and I think I've got a copy here. What they do is about this time of year, they provide it. So this will be data that we could have, going forward, probably in the March timeframe. They'll usually have it out, sometimes earlier. But they give it to you, and they break it down by grade level as to what they're allotting on the ADM. And that's where they had the 27,598. Again, I added this year's charter students less this year's tuition paid students. So that's how that one was calculated. All right, so looking at those two approaches, we've got the approach we've been using yielded about 2.3 million. Using the state-like formula approach yielded about 3.1 million. All right. Next, in your packet, I'll draw you back to the Joint Education Funding Policy. And on page 2, we move into, as to the annual capital budget. So that's the next major area of funding. And I wanted to give you a little history about how all that works and how we got here on that.
For consistency's
Yes,
sake,
sir.
Our last meeting that the school district had, we kept it separate by the 3 different areas, and then we moved to the next area after we had resolved those.
Right.
I wonder if we can do that this time as well. Let's
Go ahead and have
have
discussion
discussion with regards to local expense.
Okay.
If we have a discussion with regards to local expense at this point, and then move to the next issue and have a discussion, so
Didn't
that
work well last time.
it did.
I guess, so if we're talking about just the local expense bit, we put everything so far in terms of pure pupil expenditure and then state average of that. I guess my 2 concerns about that would be, one is it relates to looking at the pure pupil expenditure, but that's not necessarily always going to be an accurate reflection of needs. We're using that as a proxy for what the needs of the school district are, but that doesn't necessarily grow at a steady rate based on student population. So, student number 1 is obviously going to be really expensive. Student number 2 is going to cost you not much of anything, right? Because you build all the facilities then to house student number 1. And so it doesn't grow on that line. Looking at the state average of pure pupil funding, it creates some problems in that it fails to take into account the unique characteristics of Onslow County, and that we have a significant portion of our tax base that is not taxable to us, that we have a incredibly young population here. The value of our tax base compared to our student population compared to the total value of our tax base is not the same as you would see in a lot of other counties, and it fails to capture that. So these are important numbers that tell us a story about, part of the story about where we stand within the state, but it doesn't tell us the entire story about where we are as a county. And I wonder, Mr. McCole, would you be able to talk about on the operating only, sort of what we've done over the last couple of years as a percentage of our property tax revenue, and that tells that story on the local level?
If you look at, and these are based on actual numbers, not budgeted numbers, for 15-16, the percentage of actual property tax that went towards school funding, and you want it purely on the operational side?
Since we're talking about operating right now.
It is, so 20%. Yeah. I have it here. Yeah, it's fiscal year 15-16, percentage of operating of actual property taxes was 50.57%. In fiscal year 16-17, it was 51.45%. And then fiscal year 17-18 is 52.78%. And fiscal year 18-19, this is projected. This number could obviously change because our fiscal year is not done yet. It's 52.15%.
And so I would say, looking at those numbers, I mean, that demonstrates a real commitment on the part of the Board of Commissioners that putting over half of our property tax revenue into the school system that we've demonstrated. And when that percentage of our property tax revenue goes towards the school system, that number goes up, then obviously, you know, the pie shrinks for the other departments that we've also got to fund, like Consolidated Human Services and Public Safety. And so I think that helps tell the other half of this story that from our standpoint, I mean, we've put a lot of investment into the school in terms of the dollars that we actually have to dole out. And although, you know, the pure pupil funding demonstrates something on the need side there, yeah, the money that we have to pass out among all these various departments doesn't necessarily change in the same way.
And to add greater clarity to that, you compare it to other counties in our region or even across the state as far as what the percentage of property tax they're devoting to operational is, what, 46, 47 at the most?
Yes.
So I think we're doing about as much as we can. If we continue along that trend line, we won't be able to run the sheriff's department or anything else. For that matter, if we continue along the kind of trend line that we see increasing steadily there.
You're talking about putting that percentage strictly on the ad valorem tax rate, correct?
Yes.
Are there other revenue sources? Or, I mean, why is it, why target just the ad valorem? What other revenue sources?
That makes up the vast majority of our
I understand.
revenue that comes in.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
This calculation does factor in sales tax coming in. It pulls out all that revenue to come out, you know, how much of it is actually being spent from ad valorem revenue.
Does that figure you just mentioned include debt service?
No, that's strictly operational.
Once you
If you use the debt service, at the end of this fiscal year, it's going to be 59.34% if you use the construction side of it.
Another variable we probably need to take a look at in that process as well is the student population growth in Onslow County as well, because while we see the percentage increasing as well, we continue to see on average 300, 400 students per year coming into the LEA. And at that point in time, I mean, that creates additional requirements as well. So we're in a situation where the kids are still coming, and if it's flat funded or if it's a reduced rate, then we're actually impacting not just those kids, but all the kids in the district.
Following up on that, and also a couple of points that y'all just made. I mean, Shannon, you mentioned, you know, the young population in this county and how we're, you know, higher here and that, and then Mr. Price, you gave some comparisons of what other counties are doing with percentages of their tax rates going towards education. And, you know, I agree. You know, that's one of the things we need to look at. I wish I had, we can get copies of this for everybody, but maybe you can just see some coloration from here. This goes along those same lines. What you see here is there are three maps in North Carolina, and it's showing where the highest growth is for LEAs. Dark blue being highest growth, light blue, you know, moderate growth, white is neutral, yellow is actually a decline, and red is a more drastic decline. And they've got this broken down into 3 5-year periods. So looking at this is from 2004 through 2009, and you can see there are a lot of places in the state that are showing that dark blue area. There's a lot of growth there. Moving to the next 5-year period, this is 2009 through 2014, you see there's a lot less dark blue there. And then moving to the most recent period, 2014 through 2019, there's only a handful of counties that are showing dark blue. The common thing that you see throughout all of these is Onslow dark blue, Onslow dark blue, Onslow dark blue. So I think we may need to think about, when we're talking about, kind of what percentage of the budget goes towards education and the growth that's going on, that could easily explain why, Onslow County may need to be growing the portion of their budget that's related to education in comparison to maybe other services. It kind of points out that, the needs here are growing at a faster rate than needs in other counties. And so perhaps there might be other cost centers that you have that their needs may not be growing as fast.
We've got that
as
growth in the other services as well to deal with at the same time. It's not just education. That is an important factor, but we've got those other services to contend with as well. We can't just pigeonhole ourselves and say, well, we got growth here, we can only address that growth. We've got to address the growth across the whole enchilada, the whole kit and caboodle, the whole 9 yards.
Well, I understand, and I think I've heard each of you make comments, and former county commissioners, that they acknowledge this county is growing. Yeah. And we want to grow. And well, that's great. However, it creates challenges. Mm-hmm. Some of us at this table can go back to 1992. And I've got the hair to prove it, and you've got some of us were principals or administrators knowing what it was like when you had to chop up at Clyde Irwin. You were at Clyde Irwin?
Chopped up the auditorium.
The multi-purpose room. It was one of the, probably the only one in the county. Yeah. Chopped it into how many?
8 classrooms.
Because the leaders before refused to accept the notion that we are growing. We have a good challenge, we have a good problem, and it creates opportunities for success. And I've heard the argument, and not the argument, but justification, yes, you have other departments. I understand that. I wasn't born and raised here, but I've lived my entire career. And I benefit from the volunteer fire departments. I benefit from the sheriff's department. We're not here trying to dispute that we're more important than those others. We're not. We're all in here together to make this work somehow. I understand that, believe me. So I'll just leave it at that, and we can continue on.
And I guess I would say, and typically with that growth, what you would see is, or hope for, is a corresponding growth to the tax base. But what we've seen is that it's not necessarily kept pace, and this year, especially since we talked about doing this in terms of talking about this year's budget versus long term, it's certainly not going to keep pace. David, would you be in a position to talk about what you told us the other day about our projected revenues for next year, both property and sales tax?
Yes, sir. The property tax value, we lost approximately $170 million in total value, and that does factor in the original projections of over $500 million. A lot of those folks have made repairs and improvements beyond what they lost to their homes. So between the new construction build out and the repairs, it's about $170 million loss. The value of a penny has gone up not as much. It's about a wash. It's approximately a wash.
Yeah, it's a wash.
So, I mean, within
1.4 million.
yeah, so it's 1.4 million, and it was just under 1.4 million last year. So I want to say that growth was $5,000, the penny value. And to give it historical perspective, we've seen on the order of anywhere from $30,000 to $70,000 per penny gain, which is significant. Sales tax is growing, but the 12% spike that you're going to see this year is, of course, an anomaly. That's all of the construction, the repairs, the hotel rooms being rented out 100% for the past 6, 7, 8 months. So we're actually projecting around the 2 to 3% growth. So when you factor all of that in a $220 million budget, we're looking at relatively flat growth, somewhere in the order of $4 million total.
When we look at the overall county, because we all live in one county, and we have one source of money, multiple streams, but it basically all comes through the county.
Yes.
Are you seeing, as in Onslow County, we're talking about growth, your health and security services through the sheriff's office, et cetera, are you seeing the growth of those departments that are consistent with what Onslow County is getting? If we have 300 students per year on an average coming in, you have to understand that we also have a couple of parents probably
Yes.
with that's also coming here. So the tax, not the tax necessarily, but the strain on your infrastructure for health services and the sheriff's offices, are you seeing similar increases with that?
Yes, sir, we are. We're, well, as everybody knows, we just constructed a 90,000 square foot new courthouse to keep up with the additional cases that come with a larger community. Our Consolidated Human Services is seeing an uptick in the demand for services. We've been meeting with our individual departments, and CHS, and specifically social services, is asking for an additional 15 staff just to keep up with service demands. The sheriff is asking for an additional 24 personnel to keep up with the calls for service. Emergency EMS is asking for a like number to add a new ambulance.
What's the practicality of them getting the requested amounts?
I haven't. My boss is just.
Well, I guess to put it into context, I think the initial round of budget requests came in at about I think it was $27 million more than what our projected revenues are going to be.
Okay.
So there'll be some people who are not happy by the end of this process. I mean, by definition.
And I think we see a similar thing on our side, is that our needs outpace what the revenue streams that we have actually do that. So we're all in the same boat. But realistically, both boards are looking to our committee, our joint committee here, to come up with some solutions with regards to that. And I'd be interested to know if we've got anything out there other than what Mr. Holloman has presented with regards to how do we continue those revenue streams. We know that we're going to need additional money with the additional growth in all departments throughout the county. So what do we do to alleviate that? How do we come to a solution?
Well,
$64,000 question they used to say.
They used to say.
I mean,
With a 64 million.
Yeah, 64 million, yeah.
I guess in a perfect world, I'd just give you your own taxing authority, right? Just let you guys do it.
Careful what you wish for.
And because you guys know your needs. I mean, the part of what's inherently uncomfortable about this arrangement is that you guys are looking at the need side of the equation. We're looking at the funding side of the equation. With our other departments, we get to look at both sides of that equation, right? And that's just not practical here. And you guys were elected by the people to determine that for the Board of Education. And so it puts us in this sort of awkward dance. So yeah, an idea that I've floated among our board members would be that if we look at what we've done historically and what we did particularly last year in terms of funding the total education, so operating capital outlay and debt service, that ended up representing, I think, 42.15 cents out of our 70.5 cents of property tax rate. And so what I would be interested in considering is picking a tax rate that's designated for the Board of Education, whether it be right at that 42.15 or round it to a 43 cents and say that's for education. We pay out the debt service, and then the balance goes to you for capital outlay and operating. And as the tax base grows, you get the benefit of that growth as it relates to that 43 cents. And you guys essentially at that point are dealing with the same sort of equation that we are. Now, the I guess difference there would be that you're not a taxing authority, so you wouldn't get to unilaterally or as a board change that rate, which we have the ability to do. And so that's something that we'd have to talk about. I mean, I know that I, as a matter of policy, would be willing to say that if you guys took a vote and said it needed to go from 43 to 45 cents, that I'd honor that determination by the board. I can't speak for the entire board in saying that. And so, we'd have to talk about that aspect of it, but I'd really like to see a way to put you guys in the driver's seat of your own destiny financially, because you're the ones who best know what it needs to be.
And I agree with that, and I presented that at our board meeting as well, but there were some concerns with regard to the proposal. For instance, we've got certain mandated percentages of sales tax that have to be allocated, I believe, by state law to certain percentages that go to construction or to education that we're currently collecting from the state that flows down through the county. So whatever we came up with, in reality, when you use your numbers that Mr. McCall came up with over there, with percentages of the overall budget that the county has, we have a certain amount that we get. Whether we set out a formula and say we're going to get a certain amount in pennies per ad valorem taxes, or we combine that with the percentage of sales tax, the onus is still back on the county to fund the school district one way or the other.
That's right.
So whatever means that we do that are able to help us stay ahead of the game, or at least play catch up at a lesser rate than what we have in the past. And if we go to the state funding formula, because ultimately if we can't resolve this between the two boards and we had to go arbitration, the arbitration is going to send us to the larger amount based on the formulas that are there. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm not a state legislature. I didn't get a chance to voice my opinion in that process, but that's what the state legislature passed in their legislation that went on. The governor signed it, so that's law that we currently have to deal with as a last resort. I would like for us to come up with something, and I like your idea as well as I do any other thing, as long as we can make sure that it's a steady process, that we go forward, that 10 years from now, we don't have another set of board and staff sitting at the table trying to resolve the same issues that we're trying to resolve today.
Yeah. William, I really thought long and hard about your proposal, and it's been several weeks since I think you probably rolled it out. And Bob did mention that in our last meeting. And like you said, it does require us to dance a little bit. Doesn't matter who leads. We've got to work this thing out together. I personally am not sure. It sounds like a rational, a good idea to designate a certain number of cents or a percentage there. But you're right. We're still back to the same thing. You are the taxing authority. You are the people who designate that. But I just hope whatever dance we do end up performing, that it's one that is respectful, and it's one that we all, and I get the sense, I really do, I get the sense today that we feel like we're in this thing together. We got to work through it. And I think as long as if we want to tell people we have a quality school system here, people are coming to Onslow County not by accident. I don't think people are throwing darts at a map of North Carolina and it's just landing in Onslow County so often. That map that Mr. Holloman showed us. I mean, the amount of growth is more concentrated, and we are the recipient of that growth. We should be happy about that, because that tells me that the people in tourism, the chamber, our leaders, the county commissioners, the city of Jacksonville, somebody's doing something right. We've got something. I know for a fact that lots of military families, and Tim, you can probably attest to this, lots of military families come here to Onslow County because they know that if they come here, their children, particularly children with special needs, exceptional children, that they're going to get the best services possible. We are known for that, and therefore we have a high percentage. And as you guys know, it simply takes more manpower, it takes more services, it takes more money to educate children who have those exceptional needs. So I do believe we're in a good place, and I commend the conversation that's gone on so far with this business of we're in this. No matter what, we can't change the law, can we, William? We can't all of a sudden decide to tax. I saw in the paper this morning that there is a consideration for a fire tax in the county. So again, that's probably just a thought. I don't know whether that's going to come to fruition, but we got to get creative. Whether it takes a fire tax to get people's attention, individual services being taxed, whether it's a fire, whether it's education, the public is watching us, and they want us to make the right decision.
Just wanted to follow up on the designating a certain percentage to the tax rate that you would have the taxing authority, not us. And I think I've been told there are about 5 or 6 states in the country that does not, where the school boards do not have taxing authority. Mm-hmm. North Carolina is one of them. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a county who submitted a bill where they would allow them to have that. I don't know whether it went through or not. And you mentioned the $170 million loss in...
Yes, sir, in total value in the county.
Okay. As bad as Hurricane Florence was, it could have been a lot worse, and I think we all know that. And I have vivid memories of watching television when Michael hit the Florida Panhandle, a Cat 4. There's nothing to go back to. They lost everything. And I do remember back in '96, I think it was Bertha and Fran, mm-hmm. Cat 2, that pretty much wiped Topsail Beach, North Topsail. So there was significant loss and so forth. By designating a certain percentage of the tax rate, who knows? North Carolina's been lucky. Where is that constant stream of financial support? That's the concern that I have. And I'm not a CPA. I will admit that, but like you say, the bottom line is this is what you have, this is what you have to spend, and these are all the folks that are trying to get a piece of that pie.
Well,
I understand that too.
I understand that fear because
it will happen one day, but
we're living your fear, right? In that we're basically our property tax revenue is flat funding us.
Yes.
And so I mean I understand that. That's what
Let me just interject though that under your scenario, and that could happen, I agree, it could happen. We live in a vulnerable area on the coast. And if that happened, and we had the same tax funding formula we had here right now that is currently in place, the county could not support that current funding formula the way it was. If we lose a significant portion of our assets, and that's the way taxes work, you have a certain value on a property, and we assess, the county commissioners assess every year or reassess every 3 years or so how much that's going to be, and then that amount of money comes in to try to cover the needs for the school district and all the other departments. If you lose the tax base, that's the property, it's going to go down anyway. So we still couldn't operate under the current funding formula without adversely affecting all of the other departments in the county. So if we lose tax base, it's going to affect all of us. So I don't think that it's significant to concern that. I am concerned over the fact that it needs to be a diversified funding source. Right now, the money that we get from the county, it comes from a lot of different sources. We can compare it to the ad valorem tax and say it's a certain percentage of that, but in reality, it all doesn't come out of that. The land share does out of ad valorem, but not everything comes out of that. It's diversified. So if we go to something like that, I think it would still have to be a diversified portfolio of income that we can rely on from year to year.
But I think as it relates to the sales taxes, I mean, a lot of that's designated, I mean, it would still have to come from those sources, right?
Yeah, we earmark it within our budget, like, you know, and report it financially, that sales tax being applied towards education.
Right.
So, I think the other thing you're alluding to, one of the things we're facing too, from the county level, is we have $5 million in disaster contingency. Well, that's all gone out the door. We're waiting to get reimbursed by FEMA, which we all know. I don't know, maybe you might get some fast track. We probably won't see that until, the best case scenario, I think, is the end of next fiscal year. And God forbid another storm hits, and you guys know that too. So, we're rolling a little there from a perspective. We're going to get the money back, but the money we would have used for the next storm is out the window right now. So
All of those sales tax are state mandated, state law, so
Yes,
I mean, it's
that's right.
already baked into the cake.
Correct.
So are y'all saying that we would continue to get that plus however many cents? Is that the approach? Or?
I think legally we have to apply that sales tax. We have to make sure it's going towards
Right.
the needs of the school.
There's some of the percentage that's designated for this, and things like 40% of one and so forth. I mean, it's outlined, Article 40, Article 42. Plus there was that Article 46 that was passed here, and a portion of that was committed. From our perspective, all we see is dollars. Okay? We see the dollars coming in, okay? How we come up with the calculation at the county to come up with those dollars is something we can discuss. But basically, if it comes out of this pocket or it comes out of this pocket, it still needs to go into this pocket.
Right.
And we really like to see it tied to the revenue, where it's kind of, I appreciate all of what we're doing here and really getting into the numbers and looking at it, because I think, Mr. Reddick, you said it, is we've all come to the table in a very good mindset that this is sitting at the table and working as a team, not only to meet the needs of the Onslow County students, but also understand the needs of all the citizens in Onslow County. And I think we're all coming to the table and sharing those thoughts on that. And I know we're really getting into later down the road sustainability of funding of our schools. And I think maybe that's something that we can address in the future, but maybe we need to really look at 1920 right now and come to an agreement on what we can do in 1920, and we haven't even touched the capital part of it. And I think we really could maybe get some discussion on what we want to try and do for 1920, including the capital outlay, and then this group, which I really like what we're doing, and then we convene and continue working over the next year before we get to the next budgeting session and really get some good hard numbers, real-time numbers, and develop a strategy that's going to be sustainable to where, like you said, Mr. Williams, 2 more boards aren't going to sit down here in 10 years doing the same thing. So I don't know if we're ready to move to 1920.
Brought us to a good point. We've been at it an hour and 24 minutes. I am not facilitating this meeting other than our committee. They just had me sitting here between these two distinguished gentlemen. Would you entertain a time to have like a 5-minute break?
Yes.
And we'll come back and get back into the Capitol and go from there.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming back and taking advantage of the snacks. And I'm glad you didn't go outside. I was afraid you would not return. So, but it's still beautiful out there. I'd like to let Mr. Holloman to continue and maybe move on to the next area.
Yeah, the next section is related to the annual capital outlay, and Mr. Myers is the one who handles that area primarily for us, and he'll kind of kick that section off.
Mr. Holloman, just
whispered in my ear.
What?
And in that process,
I'm trying to give them a break. They've heard me talk too much today.
well, that's exactly why he was saying, well, you know, they're getting tired of hearing me talk. So what I was going to do is I was just going to explain our capital outlay program to you guys as well, okay? It's pretty straightforward. What you'll see right here, if you look at this one sheet, right here is a little color document. What I wanted to do is try to give you an understanding of what the capital outlay is for us and how we apply it every year. A lot of times, a lot of people get confused when we talk about our capital outlay program, because it's our annual capital outlay to repair facilities and capital equipment that we have in place in the LEA. It consists of a lot of things. One of the things people get confused on, because they both start with the word capital. A lot of people think capital improvement program, capital outlay, it's exactly the same thing. Well, it's not. And what the capital improvement program is we look at our budget year, we look at our long-range forecast of what we need for facilities and major repairs like chillers, roofing systems, and parking and driveways. And that's that goes from year 1 out to year 10, but normally we focus mainly on year 1 through 5, okay? Why that's important for our capital outlay, which is being fed for this year, is because at year 1, that information from the capital improvement plan, year 1, feeds into the capital outlay. We're saying, well, this is what we have identified already in our capital improvement plan, our long-range forecasting, that needs to be done next year for the facilities. It doesn't include some of the other capital equipment that we have. And an example of that would be transportation. Good rule of thumb right there. Transportation is another capital outlay piece of equipment that we have, a system that we have. Activity buses. Activity buses cost us about $90,000 a year. I mean, $90,000 a piece, right? Right now we have 4 activity. I'm just using this as an example. We have 4 activity buses that are 20 plus years old, plus over 200,000 miles. Well, they need to be replaced, and that's part of the capital outlay program that we look at when we go through and do our evaluations. Very similar to what the county does. The county goes in, looks at their capital requirements. We do the same thing. Safety and security is always a #1 concern for the school system. And so we continually look at how can we improve our safety and security at all the schools. Our new schools, while they're being built, they're more bunker-proof or more fortified, I would say, and they have different things built into them as they've been built. But we have other schools too that have to be fortified in different ways. A lot of times we have to use technology to make that happen, albeit cameras, albeit perimeter door accesses and stuff, which is part of our capital outlay as well. Instructional needs. I always use this one as a good example for capital outlay. Instructional needs, furniture, classroom furniture. How long do you think a desk and a chair should last in a classroom? Well, right now we're figuring about 25 years. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable guesstimate right there. But we have over 26,000 students. So what we're looking at is over 1,000 desks and chairs per year that we have to replace because they've aged out. I mean, they break and they age out. At $100 per set, you're talking close to $100,000, a little over $100,000 just for furniture, classroom desks and chairs for the school system. Athletic fields, playgrounds, these are all part of the instructional program that we have to look at as well. And then additional maintenance needs. A lot of things that we have going on that are identified in our capital improvement program, the long-range forecast, doesn't factor in that something breaks on us. Okay, we have a chiller that goes out in one of the schools that has to be addressed as quickly as possible. And so then we have to pull the money out of the capital outlay fund that we have to repair that as well. And so we have some needs there that come in ad hoc as they go forward. So there's a lot of things that happen with the capital outlay, annual capital outlay. Now I wanted to make sure that you're aware of that before we started showing on that next chart I have right here, because this right here is our capital improvement program for 5-year forecast by school. We have it broken down by different systems as well. But remember, this capital improvement program forecast It's just for the facilities, okay? This includes roofing, chillers, driveways, and facility needs right there that are important for us to have and addressed. And if you look on the back of the page, where you see for school year 1920, we've already identified, and we had a third party, I think many of you are familiar with Smith Senate and Ed Gordon. He's came in and he's worked with us on site to do an assessment of all the building systems for all the facilities we have, and helped us put this capital improvement plan together back in January, and it was presented to the board back in January as well. So for next year, we're looking at approximately $6.9 million in capital needs just that are fed into the capital outlay program that is part of the requests. The following year, we got $14 million based on the life systems of all the facilities. Another thing that, one thing that a lot of people doesn't register when we talk about the school system, because when you talk about the school system, you see one school and you focus on that one school. But we have 38 school facilities and about 88 acres of 88 acres of buildings that have to be worked on. When we talk about 38 schools and 88 acres of buildings, one of the things that we have to look at too is each school isn't just one building. Okay, there's multiple buildings in that facility. So right now we have approximately 281 buildings that we have to maintain with the capital outlay funds that we have. We also have 221 mobile classrooms that we have to maintain with this as well. And speaking of mobile classrooms, one of the things that we have to address in our capital outlay program is the class size reductions for kindergarten through third grade. Well, this coming year, we have to add additional, I can't remember off the top of my head, additional 10 to 12 mobile classrooms that have to be put in as well. Okay, so these are things that we have to address because that's mandated by law that we have to put in there. So we have all these different components being fed into our capital outlay program. And so just as a rough, we haven't had much communication with the board yet, but just to let you know that we've been looking at it, and the initial request coming from all the schools and all the departments, everything was about $16 million. Okay? Well, we went through and we did some categorization, and we're down about $10.5 million. We're not done with this process. We have to communicate with the board, let them know what's going on. And all of a sudden, we've got at least $10 million worth of needs, and we started with 350 requests, and now we got to figure out how we're going to break it down even more. Some of the things are mandated by law that we have to address. Then we look at safety and security of students and staff. Then we look at preservation of property. That's important. I mean, because if we don't fix it, that roof doesn't get fixed, then it creates more problems with this long term. And then also we look at the instructional need after that. But these are things that we're looking at when we look at capital outlay program. And I think it gives you a quick summary how we do the capital outlay.
So based on where we are now, is the greater need in the area of capital or operational then, would you say?
Well, I work with operations and facilities.
And I work with instruction, so we might have different answers.
Well, where would you say the greater need is?
No, I mean, and that's one of the things, I mean, we, basically operations and facilities builds the stage that instruction works off of, okay? So it's important, I mean, the students are the number one thing that we have to work with, and it's a continuing process that the board evaluates every year.
And it's all to support the students ultimately. So, it's one of those decisions, you're gonna feed your son or feed your daughter, you want to feed both your children. Operations and facilities are both important.
And I think Mr. Holland's going to give you a little quick history of how much we've had in capital outlay over the years. And one of the things a lot of people ask, and I think Mr. Williams asked this last year, is, well, if we're only going to get $3 million, why have you identified $10 million in that process? And we're saying, well, because that's the needs, it's not what we received. And so he says, well, how do you address that? Well, we've got 5-gallon buckets, and we got roofing tar. No, I'm just joking around, but we do have to patch it with things that we want to get fixed, that need to be fixed. sometimes we just have to patch.
Well, the insurance that came in, did it cover most of those roofs that had situations that were revealed by the hurricane? Did the insurance cover that? Is that gonna help out with the capital situation?
The insurance for the roofs, we had approximately 7 to 8, and I can't remember exactly the amount, but the insurance for the roofs were the roofs that were damaged at that point in time. And a good example, the area that we have a concern would be Southwest High School. Okay, you're familiar with Southwest High School? Over the gym.
I'm familiar.
Very.
Get on the roof.
That main campus, that main section of the campus, and over the gym, where the gym was, had all that damage, that roof is replaced by the insurance company, right? But the other section, right when you start going into the business classrooms and into the main offices, that part wasn't. But when you go up on that roof, you can see that it was one of the roofs that needs to be repaired as well. I mean, fixed as well. But because there was no water damage coming in at that point in time, the insurance company says no. So now we got a situation, and this is just an example. We have a situation where we're going out to bid for the Southwest High School roof up right now, and there's an economy of scale there. So if we say replace that with the insurance wanted, that section the insurance wanted, but we got another 30% that needs to be fixed too. Do we not fix that at the same time? So that's where the capital outlay monies come into that. So that's an ad hoc situation where we got to fix that roof because the rest of the roof's being fixed. So yeah, we do have some roofs that were we fixed with the insurance, but over the last several years, we've been working on a shoestring budget, and so we've been patching a lot of roofs, and they're still coming up. We still have several $1 million worth of roofs that we need to address going forward with the capital outlay program over the next couple of years.
So the situation at Southwest, as an example that you pointed out, is it so severe that it needs total roof replacement in that area of the business department that you're talking about?
Yeah, so when we go up there and you look, if you go up there and look at it, we've got several patches, lots of patches on it, and we've had leaks in the past, but at the same time, it didn't show a significant amount of damage. The damage wasn't significant enough where the insurance company was recognizing it. Now, we're going back to the insurance company and say, well, wait a minute now, let's take a look at this again. But at the same time, right now, the insurance company isn't recognizing it.
How many other schools do you have in a similar situation? Do you have other similar situations, or is that just an isolated
We have some.
incident?
Some was over at, Dixon Elementary was another one, very similar to that. White Oak High School, that's why I kept on getting tongue-tied. Over the band room, we've been having discussions about that too, because over the band room, it needs to be replaced. So we have a lot of roofing situations that the insurance company is covering portions of it.
But that was bad
not all
enough
of
at
it.
White Oak. It was pouring in the band room, so they recognized that, right?
No.
Why not? Why wouldn't they? Because
when
that
they
was
went up-
damaged then.
When they went up and looked at the roof, they said it wasn't damaged enough. But yet, when we go inside the room, you can see how much damage there was.
Well, there was standing water in it. I don't get that.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
Steve, going back to your capital needs document that you have here for each of the facilities, are these over and above the insurance? This
Yes,
is our
this
need
is over
that
and
is
above
not
the
covered by insurance?
Right.
Okay. So I guess my question is, and to your question earlier, where do we put our emphasis? The board has meetings, budget meetings scheduled on the 26th and the 29th where we'll be discussing those particular things. But I think everyone understands, and everybody should realize by now, that had we been able to address the deferred maintenance on many of these facilities, we would not have gone several weeks without school when the hurricane hit us and we sustained the damage. A lot of these roofs that were damaged were on deferred maintenance lists going back 10, 15 years. That's a significant concern for me as a board member, because he's going to talk, he being Mr. Holloman will talk about the capital appropriations needs on there, or what we've been getting typically in the past. But if you get $3 million, let's say for 1920, we got $3 million in capital outlay, and we have $10 million in needs. We're $7 million behind before we even get started. Those are just needs. Those are not wants. Those are needs that we have that are deferred maintenance. At some point, we have to address this. We're taking up and addressing the issues that we've had for years past, where the deferred maintenance appropriations haven't kept up with what our needs are. Now, I understand this is a countywide problem. The county also assumed some damages to facilities. The city of Jacksonville got damage to facilities as well. We can't control the hurricane, but we can control how we address the maintenance, deferred maintenance issues. And if we take appropriate action in the next few years to get roofs on those buildings that need them the most, we will eliminate a lot of the problems that we incurred this time, because the water damage we had was mostly directly related to roof failures. And a lot of those roofs were on the deferred maintenance list that we've carried for many, many years. Had we been able to address that in the past, we would have been able to alleviate a lot of the problems we've got.
I asked that question about where your priorities are because it would be irresponsible of us to say we're going to increase by $3 million according to the 1031 and then say we're going to increase capital significantly. That's a no-go. That's not going to happen, from my perspective. It would be irresponsible to do so. But if you say maybe you can increase that capital and maintain what you did last year, then maybe that's a conversation I'm willing to have. Because we all have set priorities. I'd love to put more patrolmen out for the sheriff's department or put more bailiffs out or whatever the request is. We can't do everything.
I agree.
I think that's what Mr. Holloman was getting ready to lead into with his, you pointed that out here. I don't know if everyone else saw that, so I think you're gonna, was that your next one?
Well, I wanted to have a general discussion about following up on capital outlay and just see where that discussion may go for everybody and try to answer any questions. So, Mr. Myers went through the next 5-year amounts, and you can see I think it's over $8 million on average over the next 5 years just for the scheduled maintenance type things to major facility systems. In addition to that, there are other items that he said, that over and above that for activity buses or whatever, that's over and above those $8 million on average. And if you look at this sheet, this shows the history of the capital outlay appropriations since 2002. You can see we had $3.3 million, and you can see that we're generally right at $3 million all the way up until fiscal year 2010. That was when the economy fell out and it got slashed in half. Then we gradually started building that back up till we're now back at the $3 million level. And so going back to the joint education funding policy, the section 2 at the bottom of page 2, that's where it discussed what we want to do with capital outlay. And basically we were at that lower funding level. It outlined how each year there was going to be a bit of growth to get us back to the traditional $3 million level. And then over on page 3, it starts talking about how it would progress forward after that. Again, putting this in the context of we've got $8+ million a year in needs, and we're only getting $3 million. How do we try to narrow the gap to address these? And so in the funding policy, it identified a way to move that funding forward once we got back to the $3 million, looking at the consumer price index. There's a specific one named there, and also taking into account the growth in square footage. And so those are a couple factors that were built in, and then also look at any other changing factors that may occur between how the state funds things for school districts. So in an attempt to try to work towards that and narrowing that gap between the traditional $3 million in funding and the over $8 million a year in needs, we put together a plan there, and you'll see this in your packet. It starts off to databases, tables, and calculators by subject. This is that consumer price index that had been identified in the Joint Educational Funding Policy. And going back to 2003, you can see the increases there over those years. You turn the page, this takes that index and basically looks at what has occurred over that period of time. Because if we want to have the same spending power that we had, back in 2002, but yet costs have increased over that period of time, it takes more money to have that same buying power. So you can see over that period of time, there was a cumulative increase of 38.7% over all those years. Turn to the next page. This looks at the square footage changes that we have to take care of. Back in the 2002-2003, we had 2.9 million in square feet, and this is not even counting our mobile units. It's just permanent construction. And then in 1920, it had increased to over 3.8 million square feet that we have to take care of. So there's more property to take care of, and prices have increased. That was a 30% increase in facilities that we had to take care of. Meanwhile, our facilities are aging. I think our average age on construction is like 41 years. And so, that's another factor in there. So if you look on this last page, again, this is trying to put today's buying power into what put us on where we were at back in 2002, just to get back to that same level of buying power. So if you start off with $3 million of baseline funding divided by the square feet back then at 2.9 million, that's $1.02 per square foot. If you plus that up for that consumer price increase over that time, the 38.7%, it would get to $1.41 per square foot, and then multiply that by the current square footage, comes up with the 5.4 million. So again, to just have the same buying power that you had back in 2002, you need $5.4 million today to do what you did then, to be on par with that. So that was kind of the approach that was attempted to be undertaken with the funding policy. And this year that we're currently in is the year that implementation should have begun. Knowing that going from 3 million to 2.4 million in 1 year.
5.4 million.
Yes, a 2.4 million increase over the 3 million to 5.4. Thank you. It's been a long day. Understand that $2.4 million increase, could be a challenge for the county. We attempted conversations to try to, can we do this in stages? Kind of like when we went moving it back from 1.5 to 3 million, do it over a period of time. What if we broke that down into, over a 4-year period? If you did, $600,000 a year, 4 years, that would have gotten us there, and could reevaluate. But trying to do something to bridge that gap between $3 million of historical funding and $8+ million in needs every year. What can we do to bring that closer together to start addressing some of this? And that was kind of the approach with the annual capital outlay. And that's all I had on that.
There is going to be a amount of revenue that we're going to have in the county for all of the facilities, all of the different departments, including Department of Education. And we understand that, or at least I understand that there's a limitation to the amount of money available for the county commissioners to provide to all of the departments that are needed. I think, though, that the presentations that we have provided here so far indicate that we have almost 1 million square feet more now than what we did back in 2002, 2003, that we have to take care of. And if you could imagine moving from 1,000 square foot house into a 3,000 foot square house over a period of time, you're going to have to put more money into that because you're going to have a larger house. You're going to have more things that can break. We've put this off for so many years that we need to address the problem. And I think we need to address it from a couple different points. I do think that we need to increase the 3 million to something more than $3 million for that portion. Now, how we do that, whether that's a calculation that we come up jointly or the Board of Commissioners decide that they want to increase that on their own, or if we do an offset based on this annual increase and we take less money on the first portion of the program that we talked about, okay, the current expense budget, that's going to increase. Our needs are going to increase. It's a matter of prioritization, like you had mentioned, Mark. We need to decide as a district, and we've got budget meetings on the 26th and the 29th of April, where assumingly we're going to have discussions regarding those issues. Okay, we're going to talk about the local current expense funding needs that we have, and on the 29th we're going to talk about capital needs that we have for both of those. But at some point we have to come to an agreement between the two boards. How much of that can we afford to increase? We all know that we got the needs. I mean, the needs are out there. You've got needs that you can't meet in your departments in the county that don't affect education. We all understand that, or at least I certainly understand that. And we only have a finite amount of money that we can raise with the current tax base and the current tax rate that we have. So we know that we're dealing with a certain percentage of that. I think it's important that we try to come to an agreement on what our priorities are for the district, school district, you know. And we can work through that separately from but the needs aren't going away. The deferred maintenance certainly isn't going away, and it will continue to get worse as we go on.
The reality is, Bob, it's cheaper to do it sooner than to wait.
It is.
It ends up costing us more.
But that leads us to another discussion, is how do you do that? Are we talking about a bond? Okay. Nobody wants to talk about the B word. Okay. Are we talking about a tax increase on property values? No one wants to talk about that in the county either. Okay. None of us want more taxes. The public doesn't need more taxes. Okay. But the reality is that we have to solve this issue. And if increasing the revenue sources are the only thing that's available to us to do that, then I don't think we can take that off the table. Now, as a school board member, that's easy for me to say, because I don't have to go to the public, okay, and present it to them. So that's where we're at. I mean, I don't see many options outside of that. We've got a finite amount of money. We've got needs on both sides of the county boards that far outstrip the amount of revenue we've got. So how do we prioritize what we need and go forward from there?
Did you want to move to construction?
If you're
I
ready.
mean,
If I had to just ask a quick question. I know, David, we've, obviously, we financed debt for school construction. Have we, or do we finance debt for this sort of maintenance?
Historically, we haven't historically. No. Now, if we identified needs and future financings that need to be done, then we could bring that into a financing. Now, none of this has been factored into our capacity model, so if we were to do that, it could factor into additional revenue sources.
Right.
Where are we at, or what have we heard out of Raleigh with the two bills that?
Yeah.
One of those, or a variation of that will be, okay? And the way that the House bill, well, I think the House bill and the Senate bill, both are structured in such a way that it depends on the funding source. One is a bond referendum that would go out to the public and get approved. The other is using existing capital that they have available to them and doling it out over that period of time. If they use the second model, where you're using the current expenses and the current revenues that they currently have in their funding sources, then we couldn't be guaranteed that we would get a certain amount of money on there. We've got between $25 and $29 million that can come to us, and I believe both bills allow for either new construction or for deferred maintenance uses, okay? But as two boards working together, I wouldn't count on what Raleigh's going to do or they're not going to do to make this discussion. We've gotten in that problem before.
If we're waiting on the state, we've been waiting forever. All right, so I guess moving into the third final phase of funding that the school district depends on the county for, and that is for new construction. And there's the third area identified in the joint education funding policy. And you have in your packet a report that looks like this. And this report is through ORED at NC State University. There are demographers who help with planning for what student population growths are going to be, what areas of the county that's going to occur in, matching that up with our facility inventories so we know when and where we need new schools built to accommodate the population growth. And if you turn on back to page 4, you see the forecast here, and what's notable about that is the upward trend. You continue to see growth going on in Onslow. That is no surprise to any of us here. If you go to the page preceding that, page 3, kind of in the upper left corner, the note that they have there that forecasted 27-28 totals, or 29,298 students, represent an average gain of about 300 students per year over the next 10 years. That's what we've been experiencing. And when you look at growing a student population of 300 students a year, and you combine that with what you see on the very last page of this document, this shows the student capacities, and all that red that you see there is the out of capacities at those schools. And so when you take where we're either at or about to be out of capacity, looking at those figures along with a growth of 300 students a year, if we're not building a new school every 2 years, then we're really falling farther and farther behind. And the commissioners are to be commended for what we've done recently with new school construction. Recently we've opened the Dixon Middle School and the new Richlands Elementary School, and then with the upcoming schools, not only having the school out on 258 coming along, but also advancing the timetable of the one out in the Dixon area because of the hot growth there, which was scheduled a couple of years later. All those things help to begin to address these needs, but it doesn't satisfy them because they keep coming and we just keep growing. And so if you pull out this little 2-page document here that's got the schools listed, on that first page, that shows the original list of schools that were identified in the joint education funding policy in the initial 10-year planning horizon. And what the funding policy was establishing was a perpetual 10-year planning horizon so that there are no surprises. The county doesn't come up and all of a sudden we just say, hey, we need to build a school tomorrow. that you see it coming and you plan it into your overall financial plans. I know y'all work with the financial advisors that help build a plan for keeping that capital reserve fund healthy and available for making the debt service payments as those are coming due, paired up with this plan. So if you look at these, this goes through, this shows, again, the Dixon Middle that's been built, the Richlands Elementary that's been built, West Central out on 258, and the New Southern that are being started now. It also identifies an expansion at Northwoods Park Middle, and then another Midwest school. And the initial thoughts were planning that far out, that may be out in the Piney Green area, but we always reassess with ORED about where the student population growth is at the time before projects are begun. Now you notice there's only one expansion on here. Back during the 2005 bond and the COPS that was issued at that time, there were projects done throughout the county, adding additional classroom wings where possible, because that's the most cost-effective way. If you have core capacity on that school that gives you ample coverage for your cafeteria and your media center and those type facilities, that you can have more classrooms, then building another classroom wing is an efficient way of doing it. But during that build up during the 2005 process, pretty much all the campuses were built out to max out their core capacities. The one school that had been identified as still having additional core capacity that could be expanded was Northwoods Park Middle. So that one's on here. But beyond that, we're looking at new entire school sites to be cost effective. So this identified that initial 10-year horizon. But if we want to be true to planning and be forward thinking and where we need to go in the future, if you turn the page, you can see that we have added in, essentially just putting it in next school 1, 2, 3, 4, each 2 years out, because of this continued growth that we see, and also knowing that we're already out of capacity. So that just gives a long view of where things are going as we continue to grow. So
Where does the next redistricting of elementary schools fit on the timeline here?
but that'll come into play with the 2 new elementary schools opening, and that was one of the things that we really appreciate y'all advancing the timetable on the New Southern by having both of those schools opening in the same year, which will be the fall of 21. Having them both open, they're both on the same side of the county. You can do one round of redistricting to have all that. So the redistricting would take place with the opening of those.
2021?
Right.
We talked about this, and I know Jeff and I and Steve talked about, you really need to get out ahead of that. So we're going to be, as early as December of this year, talking about what that looks like, because you want people to be able to plan a year or 18 months out, because you can do away with a lot of conflict and that sort of thing if you've got it planned out a little bit ahead of time. It's not quite as bad with a high school. High schools are tough. Elementary schools where they're going to a new facility, not quite as bad, but still, 18 months out is a good time to let people know what your plans are.
Down the road.
Yeah.
And Mr. Price, with working with North Carolina State and ORED, we try to find the optimal locations for the schools as well, for these elementary schools. And so by having one in Stump Sound and one close to Catherine Lake, they were the optimal locations. But what that means also is we have several schools, for example, around Catherine Lake, in the Richlands down to Jacksonville area that are over capacity right now. But that school right there could impact several of the schools. So when we talk about a redistricting for August of 2021 going to effect, it may impact several schools, not just 1 or 2 schools that are close by. We may be load balancing throughout the whole Richlands area.
Kind of creates a ripple effect.
It creates a ripple effect across.
As you move from here.
You're trying to use your whole inventory of seats out there to balance, so you're not having to build any more often than you have to by utilizing your capacity where you can.
And we try to look at redistricting as much as possible, make sure we take advantage of all the seats that are available to the school system as much as possible. I mean, and so if we see there's overcapacity in certain areas, then we go in and try to redistrict at that point in time. If that's not feasible, we start bringing in mobile classrooms as well. So, and what that happens is when you bring in mobile classrooms, then you get into the core capacity issues that we talked about, where all of a sudden the cafeteria can't hold 300-400 students at a time. And so now we've got to add additional lunch periods. So kids may be eating lunch at 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock throughout the school day. And so we do different things like that. So mobile classrooms are a short-term solution, but it's not the ideal solution for instructional purposes.
I'm just going to mention, the one slide that has always gotten my attention is that growth expectation. I remember being in the county and worked here at the district level long enough. Back in the early 90s, we had some very deplorable teaching situations. Teachers were using every nook and cranny. You described what it was like at Clyde Irwin and teaching in the hallways. Blue Creek Elementary, when it was K6, using the auditorium, part of the cafeteria, you name it. And at that time, Dr. Singletary, our interim superintendent, that was his first goal right there. We need to do something about facilities. In this county, it was like a tsunami. It started in the Swansboro area and worked its way through White Oak, the city of Jacksonville. Now we're finally experiencing down at Richlands and in Ditson. I'm afraid we're going to have another tsunami, and those poor souls that have to deal with that. But when I saw that, and I said, those poor souls that have to deal with that in 10 years, well, guess what? I'm one of those poor souls. We're having to deal with it. They're coming, and you mentioned mobile classroom units. Mr. Reddick and Mr. Lanier and I were at Heritage Elementary this morning and for the Leadership Day. And part of the tour was to go in the back of the building. How many, I call them trailers, but anyway, mobile units?
I'd say 8 or 10.
At least.
Actually, there's close to 17 now.
17.
At Heritage Elementary.
That's at Heritage
Just
with
that one
800
section.
kids. And if you go to visit Dixon Elementary,
Dixon Elementary, I believe, has 11, and we're in the process of moving 6 to 7 of them in for next year.
that's K4, not K5.
Yeah.
So I think the tsunami, because these 300 kids are not landing all in one school, they're sprinkled throughout the county.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. When you go, we need another mobile unit in Swansboro, you have to go before the town council to get.
We have to get permits throughout the municipalities and the county for any mobile classrooms we put in.
And the city of Jacksonville sent
City of
us a
Jacksonville.
notice.
And it costs to move those
And
things.
there's a cost to move them.
There's a more significant issue, and that's security. You cannot secure those mobile classrooms as well as you can a main facility.
SROs tell us that. So, anyway.
It's a short-term solution for a long-term problem.
And in talking about this, one of the things that we had discussed was, if you guys want to take a field trip, I'm serious. We can load up a bus and take you around so you can see some of these areas and what we're dealing with. So I'm offering, inviting, we can do that as well. So just so you can see it, because we sit here and talk about it, but until you actually see it, it's, yeah.
So,
One of the things I think we try to need to leave this room with is an understanding, what are we doing for 1920? We've gone through a myriad of issues that we've got. It's 3 primary areas that we're discussing, and each of them have their unique problems and probably need a unique solution. But we're on top of the budget. I mean, we can't put this off. We have to come up with a solution of what we're going to do for 1920. We've got a few months. If we come up with an adequate solution now that solves all the problems, that'd be great. But I think we have to talk about what are we going to do for the 1920 budget session. Are we going to use the same process that we used over the last 5 or 6 years? Are we going to use a variation of that? but we have to do something with that now. We can't kick that can down the road, because we're in our budget talks now. We need some direction to understand where the funding sources, or where you're thinking about where the funding sources are gonna come from, before we go in and start talking on the 26th and the 29th about how we're going to allocate the funding out to both the local needs, the capital needs, et cetera. So, and school construction will take care of itself. We've already got a program that's been established, I think, and that is the easiest part of the equation.
Yeah.
Well,
Throw it out there.
Well,
Sounds like you're asking for more
How
funding
should we
sources.
plan for 19?
I mean, I think by default, we're sort of in a position of essentially a sort of pre-formula arrangement, right? Where you guys will submit a budget and we'll have to, put that through our process. I would say, two of the realities that we're dealing with is obviously money's tight. And also we're talking about this within the shadow of HB 1031. Not that I think, the sense I've gotten from you guys is not that, that's what HB 1031 says we should get and that's what we want. I haven't got that sense from you guys. But, if we don't come to an agreement, that's statutorily what's hanging out there. And so, we're talking about this within the shadow of that. I would say, at least, and I won't speak for anyone else, from my view, as close as you can keep, I would never expect you guys to give us an operating budget that's dime for dime what it was last year. But as close as you can keep it down, then that gives us some flexibility on the capital side, and that's something that I think we've got to see some investment over there. If that's helpful.
We know you got your natural increase. That's just like we're facing that natural increase, but I think all of us know going into this 19-20 school year, we're coming out of a 18-19 year that has been challenging and is going to have effects going into 19-20. And I think we can keep those things in mind, that maybe there's going to be a brighter horizon if we can get through this one and really go to work for the future. And hope there's no Cat 4s coming in, Mr. Taylor. And because I'm just going to
Count our blessings.
You got that right, because those come through. The discussion's
The
different.
problem that we have with brighter horizons, we tend to put on our sunglasses.
Yep. Well, I got some high dollar sunglasses, and I really like them. But I think it's a reality right now of 1920, and the needs are great. Now, there's no doubt with that. The needs are great. The needs are great in the county throughout. I don't think there's anything that we can say that's going to alleviate any of those things. But
And the needs of the public too.
Well, yeah, the needs of the
went
public.
through
They're the same
storm that
thing.
we went
Yes.
through. And to turn around and then on top of what they faced through Florence, come down with a tax increase would be something that would be
Yeah, we're not.
harmful to those people.
Yeah, that's it. We've done a great job here today in discussing this. We're all looking to accomplish good things and do it together. And I really think we need to come out of this, go into our budget talks, and come back with some realistic things in our minds, knowing that there's no way in the world we're going to be able to go to the citizens of Onslow County after what they've gone through and say, oh, by the way, you've had an awful 18-19, and we're going to reward you with the tax increase. You don't have it, but you know what? We need what you do have. There's no way in the world we can do that. But I think there are ways that we can get to the table, we can go to work and provide what's in the best interest of our kids and our citizens of the county. And we do this together. We're moving forward in a tough time. We can't go looking at other revenue sources to get more revenue right now. I don't think that's going to come to fruition. But we do know where we've been. We know where we've got to go. So as y'all go into those talks and we go into ours, I think it's the anomaly year, and let's hope we don't have another one like it, that we really got to look at what's in front of us and know that there are some things that are going to increase naturally that we have to really look at on both sides. And there's some things that we need. But I think if we can really put our heads together, we can really make it through 1920.
How does the county currently handle your deferred maintenance issues? I mean, you don't have a whole lot right now because we build all new buildings, but we still have to plan for the future on those, so they're going to age as we do.
Well, we still do have quite a bit of deferred maintenance, and we are doing like Steve and Barry do, prioritizing and basing that on what the need is and the amount of money we have, and then holding for those what ifs. And we are starting to, well, not starting, we are still realizing slippage in that gap, because the needs are always going to outpace the funding.
Maybe it's time then we start to have some serious discussions of doing something similar to what we're using in the capital building program for maintenance, and having either separate or joint funding mechanism for that at some point in the future then to do that. Because if I had to place my priorities, it would be on the deferred maintenance, and any additional monies that we were able to engender through whatever formula that we come up with, that we would target a large portion of that, or a significant portion of that, to the deferred maintenance issues. So I just think that we can't kick the can down the road indefinitely. We've done it for 20 or 30 years, and we're paying for it today. And that's one of the reasons we're having this meeting.
I understand you correctly. We submit our budget. And
We examine it just like we do other departments, and
okay.
look at it and see what we can do.
okay. And as far as our two committees, that we will continue to have dialogue to prepare for 2021. And I'm sure there'll be multiple meetings on that. Everybody loves a meeting, though.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I love a parade.
Very good. I'd just like to finish with this, if I may. A couple of years ago, Mr. Williams and I attended a policy training in Pinehurst, and Ms. Paige Worsham, you may be familiar with that name, who's the research attorney for the North Carolina School Boards, North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, gave a wonderful presentation on the history of school funding and so forth, and the state bonds and everything. But what she finished that presentation pretty much by saying the need to establish partnerships and relationships between school boards and the county commissioners. I accompanied Mr. Price about a year and a half ago to Raleigh. The Education Committee with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, they pretty much said the same thing, relationships and partnerships. And as you pointed out, this was a good beginning, I think. Our two committees representing our elected bodies, we've had some good discussions, and I know our staff has always communicated with the county government about data and everything else, but now we're under different lights now. So, but anyway, I appreciate the time, your time, and your efforts to come together to the table to have this important dialogue. I think our community, our county will be much better, but as long as we plan ahead, because those numbers, those kids are coming. and it's a good thing for everybody. So, you have any comments, Don? Comments?
Sir, I think you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did very well.
I've read what you wrote. So a little brief ceremony here. I'd like to close our meeting with if there are no other comments at this time from anyone.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just thank all of us at the table and anybody that's going to look at this today. I think they should walk away from what we've done today feeling better about these boards working together. And knowing that, we've said it already once, but I'll say it again, we've got the Onslow County citizens and their children in the best interest. And today is that beginning of seeing us work together and developing that.
Very good. And I've often heard that communication is a two-way street.
Yes, sir.
This beats the heck out of going down to the courthouse.
You got that right. That's right.
Is there a motion from our committee to close our meeting?
So
There
moved.
is a motion to please close.
Any
this
discussion on the motion? Thank goodness. Thank you. We have adjourned our meeting, and I assume that we're done here. Thank you very much.